Obama's coming to town and is coming with some goodies for entrepreneurs and Kenya and hopefully the region in general. But are we prepared for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit? That is the question tonight on Checkpoint. At Yvonne Okwara, at John Allen Namu, and at KTN News KE. Please do get in touch with us on SMS as well, 22155. The hashtag we're using tonight is Checkpoint. My panel, once again tonight, Sam Gishuru, who's the CEO and co-founder at NILA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Joseph Kia, who's a senior public policy analyst at Kipra. And Nzethe Were, who's a development economist. And both of them columnists at the Business Daily. So it's all about entrepreneurship, and that's why the president is coming. But talk to us, Sam, about why entrepreneurship is so important at this point in time. President Uhuru Kenyatta passionate about it, and so is President Barack Obama. What for you is entrepreneurship the silver bullet in terms of solving our problems with unemployment and poverty?
Well, I think you just mentioned it. The first thing is unemployment. We need to create jobs, and entrepreneurship is one of the best vehicles to create jobs. I mean, look at a company like Google. I mean, Google has got over 10,000 employees, I believe, at this particular point. I mean, one company, with that number of employees. So you realize that, of course, entrepreneurship also right now is being driven by innovation, coming up with new solutions. So entrepreneurship is not just about jobs, it's also about solving our problems. I keep on saying this, we have so many problems, provide so many opportunities for entrepreneurs, which of course now translates to the jobs. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for us as young people especially. Okay,
and you will be speaking at the GE Summit, and we'll get to that in a moment as to what you will be saying and what your advice is to entrepreneurs. But Prof, this is not just about entrepreneurs. So imagine somebody like myself, who's not an entrepreneur. I'm gainfully employed, I'd like to think, and for millions of other Kenyans, and we're thinking, so we're focusing on entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, but does this visit and does this summit, can we use it to bolster our economy in other ways? In other words, if I'm not an entrepreneur, would I benefit from Obama's coming?
Absolutely, yes. And I think I want to concur what Sam has rightly stated. One of the reasons why I think Obama is here is that I think for him it's a cultural phenomenon that very much identifies with the U.S. For many years, entrepreneurship in the U.S. has really inaugurated the economy for centuries. You have people like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Ford, all these people who have really played a very critical role in terms of trying to solve the American problems. For President Obama, I think it's more of trying to really spread these gospel of entrepreneurship that I can be able to really assist in developing. In terms of the question you have rightly asked, in terms of the nexus between innovation, growth, and solving unemployment, is that, and I think some would agree with me, entrepreneurship are driven by the need of solving a problem. In the process, they innovate. Innovation implies reduction of cost of doing business. Reducing cost of doing business increases or enhances competitiveness. That attracts investment, and consequently we grow. And the recommended remedy for solving unemployment is economic growth.
Okay, all right, economic growth and entrepreneurship. And that's it, though, we're dealing with a world superpower. And oftentimes, people will say, well, we're getting the short end of the stick, or we can, if we're, obviously even the balance of trade is highly skewed in their favor, not ours. So what do we need to be wary of, even as we go forward with this summit?
I think there are a couple of things we need to be aware of. First of all, entrepreneurship is not the solution to Africa's problems. It's not the only solution. Okay. I think it is a piece in the puzzle that's very important, but I think we can't forget things like building the skills of our young people so that they're employable, so that they can innovate, and so that they can have the skill sets that drives the economy forward. Entrepreneurship sits on a foundation of skills, and that skills has to be solid in order for that entrepreneurship to take off and lead to that economic growth. That's one thing. I think the other thing we need to be aware of is that we're dealing with a very different U.S. Pre-2008, everybody was very confident in the U.S. economy and its prospects, etc. But we're coming through a new U.S. that has really been shaken in terms of their financial and economic confidence. The world has been shaken, and I think the U.S., the Americans themselves, are still in the process of recovering economically. So we need to understand that they will come with a perspective where they're more aggressively trying to meet their interests and meet their goals. They are viewing Kenya as a destination to invest, through which they can make profits that would drive economic growth in the US. So I don't think we should have this naivete that they're coming with this altruistic, agenda, and that, we're going to get what we want. I think we need to understand that they do have their interests. They want to protect those interests. They want to bolster their economic growth. And as Kenyans, we need to think strategically in terms of the sort of capital we're going to be getting. We need to be looking for long-term patient capital. We should avoid hot money. And we should really try to get guys to anchor in and invest in the long-term development of the country.
All right, absolutely. Sam, Nzefe has raised an important point about skills. Let's take a look at the Uwezo Fund. The uptake of that hasn't been as high as expected by the government. A lot of young people still struggling to put together a business plan. 30% of the tenders are set aside for the youth. Do we have enough skills where young people even know how to put together a tender, how to engage with government? Just talk to us about the skill set, particularly because you are right at the heart of it, dealing with young people. Is this a challenge?
I have to completely agree with her on that one. And I think one of the things I've noticed is the fact that our education system needs either to change or to be improved on. Skills are lacking, even when it comes to entrepreneurship. When you bring these people from the university, they can barely do anything as far as business is concerned. So it's a really, really big challenge. So NILAB is forced to play, again, the role of a university, post-university sort of training, where we provide a sort of a three-month MBA program. So I'd probably suggest strongly that we need to start looking at our education system and preparing these people from an early age. They need to start innovating and learning how to innovate from the first year in university, not from the time they're done with university. So that's the other problem. That's why you notice that even when the resources and when we have got available plans like the Uwezo Fund, the Women Fund, the Enterprise Kenya Fund that's coming up right now, there's very little uptake. And even when after the few that get access to that don't do anything useful with it that we can actually see.
Absolutely. So
we cannot say necessarily like right now, say 5,000 jobs have been created from the Uwezo Fund. We either don't have the data or it doesn't exist. And so there's a lot of need for that. And I think the presidential, there's a presidential internship program that has come into play. And I think it might just solve part of that problem by attaching these interns to corporates like 7Cs, like NILAB, like these other companies. And I think from there maybe we might see some improvement, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I think this is a serious problem with the education system.
Right, okay.
Yes.
I would like us to talk about some of the things that, if we take a wider look at the Kenyan economy, and hopefully with this trip, we're hoping to look at foreign direct investment and say, come to Kenya, because that's what we're saying. Come here. But we do have challenges, Prof, with corruption. And Sam will tell you, startup capital is difficult. Most companies, in fact, Prof, put corruption in their cost of doing business.
That's true.
So what happens to this young person who doesn't have the capex to begin with, and then now has to factor in a kickback here or there? What, in your view, are the challenges that would actually make this whole panacea seem?
Well, I think I agree with you. I think issue of corruption, I think it's a fact that we have to deal with. And I think the question is not the problem itself. It's how we go ahead and solving these problems.
Do you think we're dealing with it in a way that gives confidence?
Truly, I think conceptually, I think in my opinion, what we have not done is to unpack this corruption. What we have really assume is that the impact of corruption is homogeneous rather than heterogeneous. In the sense, what I mean by that is that the economic impact of particularly issue of capital flight, someone taking money out of the country, vis-a-vis giving a policeman 1,000 shillings to avoid traffic violations. The impact of those two scenarios are very, very different. And if you have to fight it, obviously there's constraint about the cost, the political cost, the economic cost have to be involved, and conceptually, corruption is a criminal action that that is provided within our legal system and need to be resolved. If someone chooses to engage in a corrupt deal, what they do is they calculate, or they do what cost-benefit analysis. The gain they're getting has to be greater than the probability of being apprehended, as well as the cost of being punished.
Right.
And I think we have to give the president a lot of praise, in the sense that he has maybe increased these policy instrument of apprehension. Because once you increase it, then you make it very, very
acts as a
expensive for
deterrent.
someone to do engage in
Okay, all right. Do you think Kenya is ready, Prof, for what's coming our way? Do you think we have talked about agreements like AGOA, for example, which we know wasn't as successful as we'd have liked in terms of the balance of trade and what we were sending out, and whether the quality, the standards of the goods that we were exporting met that. And we're going to be talking about that. In fact, the two presidents are going to be having bilateral talks. Are we ready for that in terms of the agreements that we're going to sign?
I think, I think the jury is out on this one. I think to me is that I think what is so puzzling is that you have these bullishness that's coming from international market about where we're going as a country, but that bullishness is met with a lot of cynicism in locally. It's almost like we don't seem to understand that. So
you think we don't believe in ourselves enough?
To some extent, I think, again, you cited some of the statistic, the economic growth that we're experiencing, but what you hear locally is, something very, very different. Now, in terms of whether we are prepared or not, I think, again, we have to really, in my opinion, negotiate some of the decisions very, very strategically. Because what will have happened is that if you go back in the beginning of 1800, when Europe, what you call the Berlin Conference, Europe got together and they observed Africa. It's the same intensity that seems to really, coming through in the second round. The good thing, and I think this is where maybe our generation have to really play a part, is whether we are really prepared. Because as my colleague rightly stated, the reason Obama is coming here is not altruistic; it's driven by economic interest.
Okay.
And that is also manifests itself in China coming in, other countries really coming in. And I think the issue is whether our generation are really prepared to negotiate in such a way that we'll be able to solve our problems.
Okay.
That one I think is still out.
Okay, and that's what do we need to be doing? What are the negotiations that we need to have? Sam Gishuru will be there, and we'll talk to him about what he's going to be speaking about.
Yeah.
But, what is that we need to do?
I think there are a couple of things that we need to be very strategic about. One is really looking for long-term patient capital. We need to prefer and select investors that are in for the long term. We don't want hot money that's going to be in and out and cause economic instability. So I think we need to be very clear on that. I think another thing is sort of leverage impact investment and social entrepreneurship funds. I think they are also by nature more patient, and they're more development oriented anyway, and they do have a mission built into the financing.
Okay, right.
So I think if we can look into social entrepreneurship as well, and I think something else we need to be aware of is that if we can get people to build and bolster our manufacturing sector, I think it's very important. Right now, if you look at the export profile that we have to the US, it is mainly raw materials and assembly through AGOA. What we need to do is really build a manufacturing base so that we sophisticate our exports, value addition, and get more money in the end for what we're making. So I think if we can look at those three things, long-term capital, social entrepreneurship, build the manufacturing sector, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
All right, Sam, so you have these entrepreneurs who whose businesses don't have a big history, and you're meeting some of the big tycoons, some of the big businessmen, and obviously they're going to put in the money, and taking a look at the history of this tiny little company, this startup, and of course they're going to be pulling those strings. What's your advice to entrepreneurs who will be present at the summit in terms of getting the best deals? Because it's also easy for them to go, I've met Richard Branson, I've met one of the sharks, I've met, Strive Masiyiwa, whoever else will be there, but just leveraging and getting this right, because this is it. This won't come again.
Well, one of the things I have to say I've learned this week is that this is not actually a government-to-government conversation. I don't think a lot of bilateral agreements will come out of this. One or two will, but I've learned this week that this is an entrepreneur-investor meeting. Because I was wondering whether we'll be able to raise a bit more money to have Konza accelerated, to have our Galana irrigations done, to have all LAPSET, all these projects. But I was actually made to understand that this is about entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs. So the young entrepreneurs in this country will be meeting entrepreneurs from the US who are the global ambassadors for Obama. And what I could tell them is that these relationships don't just happen. They will not just happen on the platform. These relationships have to be built. And for them to be able to negotiate with the investors very well, to understand what she's just talked about, vulture capital, make sure you avoid that. Make sure you look for patient capital. Make sure you look for capital that is aligned towards what you're doing. The investor actually understands your kind of business, has invested in that kind of business in the past. You look for an investor with a track record. as much as the investor is doing due diligence on you, do some due diligence on the investor as well.
Okay.
Some of the problems we've experienced is what again she mentioned, that some investors came in a bit too early in this market a couple of years ago. They exited as well with a really bad taste of what the market was like. But they were looking for opportunities. I mean, these people are not coming here because they love us so much. Let's agree to that. They are looking for ways to increase their portfolios. Okay, it's up to us as well to be able to understand how can we take advantage of that particular presence and make sure that we also take care of our own interests.
What will happen to the entrepreneurs who won't be able to be at the summit? Are we looking at a trickle-down effect for someone who will not be there? How does this benefit that entrepreneur who will be essentially on the sidelines of this whole summit?
Well, one of the things is that the event will be live streamed. And of course the programs will be shared. I mean, I'm sure it will be on social media. The best thing I would do if I was not an entrepreneur in the summit is follow the conversation. Follow who came for the summit, what were they looking for, what kind of interest do they have. In the last couple of months I've been traveling around the world looking for investors to come and invest in the NILAB setup, and I've discovered people interested in energy, renewable energy especially is a big interest. Agriculture is a big interest. Food security has been a big concern for a lot of people, and so water and sanitation as well. So be able to find out what these investors are interested in, and if you have passion towards that conversation, join it. So you don't have to be there with the investor. You can actually create a relationship from a remote location with these investors. My panel conversation is about specialty hubs and incubation labs. And I hope to drive a bigger conversation towards making sure we invest in marine tech type of hubs and incubation hub, or agri-tech or fintech, and cover places like Mombasa, Rift Valley, cover places like Northeastern in terms of pastoralist. Can we build hubs and labs there for people who are interested in, issues to do with pastoralism, cow hide, horns, hooves, and what those kind of things can be used for.
Value addition to a lot of our raw materials that Anzetse had talked about. But what's the environment like for a startup in Kenya? Because it is widely believed that we favor multinationals at the expense of our own startups and our own businesses. Prof, perhaps you can talk about that, what the environment is like for an entrepreneur in this country.
Obviously, I think we had a conversation with Sam earlier on before the show start, and I think one of the major problems is lack of awareness. You come with a new idea. The first thing you do is, first of all, to ensure that you protect that idea. So the issue of intellectual property becomes very, very central. And what happened in our country, that's happened quite often. But again, going back to what Sam is saying, the reason why these multinational guys are coming is that we have resources, we have the opportunity, but you don't have the capital. So we have to deal with them in one or another. And so one other source I think is also very important is so making sure that we tap our own capital domestically. In fact, there's a conference in Addis which was again this idea of trying to raise domestic mobilization, which is so central. And my point is, we have a lot of capital in our show that is not harnessed or unleashed. A case in point is you have Thika Superhighway that was constructed. When this idea was being conceived, nobody had foreseen the amount of capital that will be unleashed along that corridor. So we can have some kind of a commercial project that can start this capital, which is already in our own country, but is held in what we call dead capital.
All right, okay. I know what you're referring to, but then there's also the issue about how we utilize the funds that we have in the country. And I think we talked about this a little earlier with my colleague John Allen Namu about how we utilize our funds in the country. I mean, take a look at our national budget. How much of the money that we set aside for various functions in the different ministries goes back to Treasury at the end of the year, and here we are again with our begging bowls out saying, we need more money.
I mean, I think we have a fundamental problem in terms of how we structure our spending in this country. If you look at government spending in 2013-14, over 78% of that went to recurrent expenditure, right? If you look at 2014-15, we're due to spend over 60% on recurrent. Now this budget, we're trying to get our recurrent down to 50%. So we're having a really big problem problem in terms of even the debt that we're accruing as a country. A lot of that is going into recurrent. Now, of the money that goes into development funding, which is sort of the problems that we've been talking about in terms of our absorptive capacity, we're not even absorbing the money that we have left over for development. We're not absorbing it sufficiently. So I think we really need to look at the spending habits, and this is why I'm saying that we need to do structural work before we go hunting for money. Kenya and Africa is really into hunting for money because we think money is a solution to our problems. But if you look at the way we're spending and structuring our spending, what we need to do is, one, build up our skill sets. Number two, figure out why we're not absorbing the money. What are the technical skills gaps? What is the issue behind that lack of absorption? So that when we do attract the capital, we don't frustrate the investors. Because we're in a very dangerous position. We're telling guys to come and invest, but are we going to be able to absorb and deliver? You know, are we going to be able to deliver on the promises that we're making, on the returns that we say we're going to make, you know? So I think we do need to do some homework, figure out why we're not absorbing money properly, cut down on our recurrent expenditure, so that when the investors come in, we are ready for them, we can deliver those returns, and we can build our economy.
All right, and still talking about entrepreneurship, and Sam, this question I think should have gone to you in the first place. The environment for an entrepreneur in this country, you're sitting there at, you know, NILAB and all of these people are coming there, and you're providing this space for them to do so. So you're creative, you're innovative, you've come up with something. What then? Do you find a hostile situation when you go out there trying to get simple things like patents even?
Okay, let's start from the fact that, one, we only have like a small handful of incubators in the country. NILAB has a contract with the Kenyan government, but incubators are heavily government subsidized. Now, I didn't hear any budget going towards innovation deficit in this country this year, and that is a bit of a problem. Estonia has got 60 billion, I think, if I'm not wrong, on innovation, and they have a population of 1.3 million people. We have a 40 million population, and this amount of money we put on innovation was what, 1 billion that was announced by the president just recently. And so basically, first, that's a serious problem. When NILAB's contract with the government runs out, what next? We don't have another incubation hub that's heavily subsidized by government. So where will the innovators go? Now, normally we have over 100 applicants, and we can only pick 6 every 6 months. So we can only pick 12 every year. And so we are looking at hundreds of innovators looking for a place to go and work from. And so that's one of the biggest problems, and we have 90 plus remaining out there not knowing what to do. Two, corporates don't seem to really be committed towards mentoring, co-creation, incremental innovations. That is our second challenge. Corporates seem to be very afraid of buying local as well. So even if you're building solutions and they're not being bought locally, what does that mean? If government itself is not acquiring local solutions to use, does that say that they're very confident about the local innovation ecosystem? And so, of course, that goes to the problem that Prof mentioned again. So, who is going to invest in this country if we are not buying the same products ourselves? And so if we start buying those products, if you talk to an investor and say, well, I have a deal with the Ministry of Education for this particular X product, then the investor suddenly has a lot of confidence that he's going to get a times 10 return on investment, because you can almost see how much has been put in the education budget. So we've been having so many challenges as we grow, and NILAB is about 4 years old right now, but you can also see, okay, these are the gaps that we have, this is how to solve these gaps, and of course government is a really big player. And so we hope for a lot more engagement.
Right, government is big business, and I know you work closely with government, but accessing government services, accessing government tenders, for example, how simple has that been for some of the entrepreneurs you've worked with in terms of just getting this 30% of the tenders that are out there?
Wow, I could probably say 0.001% of the entrepreneurs have had access to a government tender. So it's not how simple it is, it's how complex. I think we'd rather talk about how complex is it, from gatekeepers in government who will, completely make sure you don't meet the right people to have the right conversations, from people who are trying to be corrupt right here in government who will always ask for, a bribe. I mean, you're asking a young entrepreneur to pay $1 million shillings to get a contract, and we have a zero bribe policy for all the startups we work with. You're talking about tenders that have already been dished out before they're advertised. So you're having an entrepreneur spend 2 to 3 weeks preparing documents that will never see the light of day. So I have to say that government as a big player has a lot of work to do in terms of changing policy, in terms of talking to us, explaining to us, teaching us their processes and systems. This 21, 22, 23 year olds also don't understand the processes of procurement in government, and they're pretty complex. I mean, even I have a problem with them myself, and I've been in business over 10 years. So I'd say that, well, government has done a lot. I mean, from working with ICT Authority, they were very open to working with entrepreneurs. They have put entrepreneurs on very good platforms. The current CEO, Victor, has actually extended we were at the Connected Government, gave us a platform to talk to investors. Konza is very open. The current CEO, Tanui, is also very open to having conversations. That's very, very brilliant that young CEOs are coming into government, parastatals, and calling us and say, come for a meeting. These are the opportunities for entrepreneurs. Let's work on them. The president promising the $1 billion shillings for Enterprise Kenya, very good, very beautiful, but we need a lot more. That's a very small, change. We need a lot more to actually have impact.
Okay, and that's it. How should the government change its interactions with young people, with startups, and its approach to entrepreneurship? Yes, they've already done quite a bit, but how much more if you consider that opening a business in Rwanda takes hours, and here it's a long step process. And even as we continue to say that Kenya is an economic powerhouse, Rwanda is coming up, and so is Ethiopia, really fast.
I think for me it has to get down to skill sets. That's, for me, is the fundamental issue. And I think here I have a concern with government changing our post-secondary, some of our post-secondary institutions into universities. I think vocational schools and technical schools have a crucial role to play in building the skill sets of young people, and I think that is something that government should be more aggressive in encouraging young people to do that, and not think that you have to go to university, get a degree in business, and then start a business, but that you can do these practical, technical skills that can build you up. I think another thing government needs to do, I think, is be a bit more aggressive in attracting impact investing funds. I think there is a big trend right now in the world around social entrepreneurship, impact investment, and I think that is a sort of capital that we'd be able to, first of all, experiment, do our pilots, make our mistakes. That capital demands less returns generally. The most, you're looking at the triple bottom line of financial, social, and environmental return. So there is a lot more understanding around, you may not make the financial returns, but if your social impact is great, that makes sense for them as well. So I think we need to start looking into different types of finance that are out there, the types of finance that would work for Kenya where we are right now, and the types of finance that will allow the youth to experiment and figure out how it really works. Because as what Sam has been saying is that we're learning as we go along. We don't have the formulas. We don't have these ancient economies that have figured it out. So I think we do need to attract the capital that allows that experimentation to happen with the ultimate objective, obviously, of getting the returns back in the long term.
Okay, Prof, as we have our closing comments now, I'd like you to comment on two issues, if you can. What Kenya needs to do to make sure that she stays at the top and is the economic powerhouse of the region. Like we've talked about, there's the other countries that are coming up, and just what we need to fix to make sure that we stay on top, and also what we need to do to make sure that this is shared out to everybody, because then it starts to become that it's only a certain group of people. We talk about Africa rising, but for whom? Today we're hearing Kenya has $8,700 millionaires out of the millions in the world, but just how to be able to now share the spoils out to everybody.
Good. I think you asked a very fundamental question, which I think it's actually ties to the question you are raising between what Rwanda is doing and Ethiopia is doing. What's very unique about Kenya, and I think I want to highlight, because I think it's one of the major distinguishing characteristics of our country, is that there are two principles that drive economic development. You have the issue of equity vis-a-vis efficiency. Equity is about how dividing the cake. Once we make this cake, then we divide who's going to get what. That is determined by the political power. On the other hand, efficiency is about baking this cake, which is driven by economic forces in the market. What we have done is that we are able to really, on one hand, our economy has been driven by market institutions. Politically, through our new constitution, we are able to really, for some reason, and I think maybe democracy looks to be a market, it looks dirty, but somehow we're making some tangible benefit.
Okay.
And to me, that's actually really attracting foreign direct investment. Rwanda and Ethiopia have chosen to take the economic route, and they're doing very well. But at one time, they have to come and deal with these political issues in terms of how these how you subdivide this cake. Now, in terms of how what we should do in order to remain on the top, I think we should continue this development strategy that we have started of cost reduction. We have the issue of standard gauge railway that is reducing the transportation cost. There's also this initiative that you are reducing the energy cost, which again going to this idea of reducing the cost of doing business. Once you reduce the cost of business, you increase competitiveness, and thus attract investment. Very quickly, and I think this is an issue that I think you addressed to Sam, and I think my colleague here. Government, the role of the government, sometimes you assume is something out there.
Yeah.
The way someone is putting it is the government need to do this, need to do this. But you ask is, who is the government? It is you and I. And unless you've asked the government to do the certain things that you want to do, most chances they will not get it treated. So it's up to the young people, especially the entrepreneur, get themselves organized and start demanding for these policies that are really more favorable to them. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you have the multinational coming in. They also have equally,
the big money
and they can also influence how the things will go. So, in a nutshell, I think we need to continue the development strategy that we have taken, reducing the cost of doing business.
Okay, all right. Sam, then we'll finish with you, Andzetse. Sam, your hopes for this, what you're going to be speaking about, and just again remind us why entrepreneurship is the big thing and how to make the most of it.
I think number one is my hopes for this is that I think we need to behave better. The world will be watching us. This event will be live streamed from the White House, from the GS, and from the President Obama's website. Will be live streamed globally. All the media will be watching. I think as a country we need to behave better for us to be able to gain some soft power that places us as a place where people can come to visit after this event for tourism, for business. That's extremely important for us right now. I mean, anything we do that could end up messing that kind of reputation, I think we should stay away from. Okay. My conversation, my panelist is a very high-powered panel that is going to be discussing specialty incubators and accelerators. And as I was saying earlier, I hope that after this particular conference, the government can see the need to expand what we do. We're already talking to county governments to see how can we set up incubators in different counties to stimulate entrepreneurship and stimulate innovation in those counties, hoping that the counties themselves will go to the incubators to get the solutions they are seeking for some of their challenges. But I'm hoping that at the end result of that incubator conversation, we will have incubators that range from restaurant incubators, dual-kali incubators, agri-tech incubators, marine incubators. Even we are bordering very, Somali and Sudan here, and we need even defense security type of incubators to build security solutions locally instead of importing all these things.
Why not?
Of course, I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring more corporates to do their corporate social investment within the same region. Well, I insist, I say that entrepreneurship gives us an opportunity to create more jobs, and I like what she said a bit earlier. We really need to have laid a very good foundation for this to actually happen. For me, I'm looking forward to as a place where we create more jobs, reduce insecurity because of the extremism is happening because of lack of hope, and people with jobs will not be going to Somali for extremists to sign up for the extremist activity. So
all right,
that's
great
my
stuff.
hope.
Andzetse, final comments?
I think we just need to, as I'm saying, understand the different players that have to participate in this conversation. I think one player is government, and as these people have said, I think their role is really to create an enabling environment that makes investment attractive. I think the other role that needs to play their role is the private sector. I think being a bit more creative, flexible in the way they approach economic growth and development and in terms of their investment strategies. And I think ultimately that the Kenyan citizen, we need to become a bit more analytical in terms of put pressure on government and have our lists and our demands, so that when Obama comes to Kenya, there's a very clear sense of Kenyans want this, these are our demands, and this is how we want to leverage this interaction. So I think we just need to continue to have conversations and get more confidence and a bit more specific in terms of what we want when these big conferences come. What are the specific things that we're looking for?
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you all. Sam Gishuru, NILAB, Professor Joseph Kia from Kipra, and Andzetse Were, development economist and columnist at the Business Daily. We will continue with our focus on the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, so please do stay with us, and we'll be getting to your views in just a moment. But John Alanama has been following the conversation tonight and wraps it up. And what's the point?
Very interesting insights coming out of that discussion. Very, very insightful indeed. Now, there are a couple of points, of course, that you'll be taking home. Here are some that I noted down during that discussion. The first one is that whereas the Global Entrepreneurship Summit is coming to Kenya and we're going to be discussing entrepreneurship globally, there still are some local challenges, specifically within the youth as a subset and focus for entrepreneurship. And that is the challenges that they're facing with respect to accessing capital, accessing government. Those lacks of linkages are still a serious challenge, and it will be important not just for the government but for the youth themselves to be able to study up, to be able to find people who can inform them on how to be able to access government, how to be able to write a proposal, a business proposal that'll get you into the room with that entrepreneur that you're looking to get some deals from. Now, secondly, the cost of doing business cannot be talked about enough in this country with respect to the things that are making it more expensive to do business in Kenya, and also to an extent within the region, corruption being one of them. That a business person would have to figure in corruption, figure in monies for corruption as a cost, as an actual cost to doing that business. It makes other investors who are coming into this country a bit unwilling to engage with the current setup, with the current scenario in this country. We need to be able to resolve these issues in order for us to become even more attractive. As Yvonne had mentioned, there are a lot of things that are very attractive about this country, but to become even more attractive, the business environment must be one that abhors corruption to the greatest extent. Finally, the devil is indeed in the details with respect to what's going to be happening in this coming week and in the weeks to follow, with investors coming from around the world and staking their interest in Kenya. None of it is altruistic. All of them have an interest in being able to benefit and get the greatest benefit that they can for their businesses and for themselves once they invest in an idea, once they invest in a business in this country. So as entrepreneurs, as government, we need to be extremely clear with what it is that we want and be strategic about the kind of money that we want from them, the kind of investment that we want from investors coming from around the world. That way we'll be able to plan long term and secure the fundamentals for businesses, for entrepreneurship, and indeed for government and investment in this country for a long time to come. And that this evening is a point. Alright, great interview. Of course, keep your feedback coming in on Checkpoint this evening. The hashtag is indeed Checkpoint. We'll be reading some of your feedback in a few short moments. Let's just take a short break now, and we'll be back on KTN Weekend Prime, the Points of News.